I'd like to welcome you all to my presentation on crafting presentations. To start with, this is going to be a introduction to my thought process behind how I would make a presentation, and I'm going to be focusing on three main different styles of presentations that you may find. So presentations that would accompany lectures, like what you would see a lecture in a classroom. You got presentations that would be used alongside step-by-step guides, where the presentation contains information on how to do something step by step. And you have presentations like this one, which are tools that assist the presenter in displaying their information and adding a little bit of pizzazz to the presentation and content. So the first thing that we're going to focus on is, what is the presentation for? And a few questions about each section that would indicate that your presentation should be following a certain track. This is important because before you even start planning any of your presentation, before you start planning what content you're going to use and how you're going to say it and how you're going to organize it, you need to know exactly what your presentation is going to be used for and how it is going to be used. It helps with your decision making. How are you going to organize your content? How are you going to organize the words, and how much detail you're going to put on each slide? It helps you pick design ideas. So how are you going to format it? What is your theme going to look like? And helps with individual slide formatting. So how are you going to style your slides to get your point across as easy and as readable as possible? For lectures, some questions to ask yourself: is this going to be a lecture-based presentation? Firstly, is it going along with the lecture? Are there many key points that you want people to know and that you want people to be able to copy it down, especially if people are taking notes on what you're saying? For step-by-step guides, again, detailed is there's a step-by-step guide that people are going to be following. Will the presentation itself be used as a reference without the aspect of a speaker giving more information onto it? And finally, with presentation tools, will it go along with the speaking piece? Like what I'm doing now, where I am bringing most of my content with speaking, and the presentation is a visual aid. And the audience can take notes if they want, but usually for presentations that are just about a content or about somebody's research, people don't take notes on those. So now that you know what type of presentation that you're going to be using, you need to look at planning the actual presentation. And this is planning in the aspect of the entire thing. So you have some basic design decisions that you need to make sure you have before you even touch PowerPoint. And yes, it is helpful that you can just go in and start doing things in PowerPoint and messing around, but I feel that when you are making a presentation, it is a lot easier to put all of the content that you're going to say onto an outline, a planning document, or something that allows you to organize it before you even touch the PowerPoint, because then all you have to do is just transfer information rather than flip through a bunch of slides to figure out where something would go. And you should have content already. If you need to do research, do your research. If you haven't done research at all, incorporate your research document into your planning document, and then you don't have to take those two steps separately. You can just put them all together as one. And for example, as a planning document that I use, it looks like this. I use bold for the titles, and each bold section is a new slide. And then on top of that, I use the text, just the regular text, to say this is the content that I want to be speaking of during my presentation. And now not all the regular text goes on to the PowerPoint, but it gives me the ideas of what I want to be communicating. Now for our lectures, your important parts, the things that you want people to remember, should be your bullet points. They should be a bunch of different bullet points and the type of content that you would see as the main details on a slide. Now each time you change your topic, that should be a new slide, so that would be the part that is in bold. And sometimes you may run out of content and you have to expand slides and have multiple slides per topic, that's fine. But you should definitely start a new slide whenever you have a new topic. For step-by-step guides, I would say have every single step already written out in a document. And when you're deciding what to put information where, either break the steps into chunks, easily manageable chunks, or say each individual step gets its own slide, and then go into detail on the slides on what each step needs to be done to complete it. And for presentation tools, again, you want to use a single slide per topic, and it is always helpful to group topics that fit thematically together. So in this presentation, the theme for each section, there are sections. You have your planning, you have your design, you have the section that we did at the very beginning, what type of presentation it is, and all the content is fit together in those sections to keep all of the relevant details together. And next we're talking about PowerPoint design. And this is different than slide design because this is talking about your overall PowerPoint, your general themes, the design, the fonts you choose. So for some general rules, you need to be consistent. Consistency is key. If it's not consistent, it looks sloppy, mismatched, and thrown together. You want to keep it readable, and this goes along with consistency. If you use a certain font for titles, use that font for every title in your presentation. If you use a font for your body text, your bullet points, keep that same font throughout the entire presentation. A good starting point for that is the PowerPoint's built-in themes. And keeping it readable also includes your color schemes. Do not ever use green on red or red on black or red on green. Make sure that you're sticking with dark colors for a background and a light text, so the dark purple and white as you see here, or a light color for the background and a dark text. And make sure that if you step away from the presentation, your font and images are large enough that they can be seen at a distance. Now, this really doesn't matter too much if you're doing it virtually like I am, because you can see the screen and the information easier. But if you're doing these presentations in a public setting or you have them displayed behind you, then the fonts and the images and the text, it all needs to be readable from a distance so anybody who's looking at it can see exactly what it says. Keep a single theme. Don't start switching it up. And transitions, avoid them. If you're using anything besides a basic slide or swipe that lasts for like half a second during the presentation, you are doing too much. The presentation is supposed to be an assistant tool to you, the speaker. It is not supposed to be the main focus of attention. So don't let the presentation draw away from the content. Now, for lectures, I'd recommend keeping it simple. Just black text on a white background. Expand on all of your points vocally. And keep your content in there very easy to read and just simple. Doesn't need to be complex. Your step-by-step guides show every step. Somebody should be able to take this presentation and look at it without you speaking anything about it, follow the steps to complete whatever task they have at the end. Again, black text on a white background. Nothing too complex. Although you may be including more specialized images or fonts, so you may have to finagle a little bit with exactly how it's going to look to make sure everything fits together. And for the speaking wise, you should be able to expand on each step and not have the PowerPoint just covering all of your content. Your presentation tools. These should start with a theme. And whatever theme you pick, pick one from PowerPoint's defaults. If you're excellent at PowerPoint, you can make your own. But that's a completely different lesson. So start with a theme and stick with it. The built-in PowerPoint themes are great because they give you formatting for all of the types of slides in there. They keep a consistent font and a consistent background, and they are guaranteed to be readable and visible as long as you don't start changing font sizes from far away. You want to be creative but consistent, again, so don't be afraid to take risks in how you're doing your slide design. And as I've said many times, keep it readable. Now, a big one here is for your slide content versus your note content. Now when you're making your presentation, hopefully you will have had a notes document before you started the PowerPoint. If you didn't, then this would be the time to expand upon exactly what you want to put in your notes based on what you have on your slides. For lectures, you want the notes to have the nitty-gritty details. So if you ever need to reference back and look at them, you have a bunch of information that you can expand upon what the absolutely need to know details that you have on each individual slide. For step-by-step guides, your notes should be answering the question, why? Why is this step important? Why do you do this step before doing a different step? While the slides themselves just contain the necessary information to complete the guide, but they don't explain any of the semantics behind why things are done in a certain order. And for presentation tools, your notes should contain everything you want to talk about. If you're making a point, maybe it's just a small subscript in your notes that say, maybe mention this, but if you want to talk about it, should be in your notes just so you remember where you're going with things. And for your slides, very little info, keep things short and sweet. Now, individual slide design is where you can get a little bit more creative than the overall theme of the presentation. There are a bit more general rules for individual slide design than there are for presentation design. And starting with that, you've got the 7x7 rule. Essentially, it just means 7 words, 7 lines. No more than 7 words per line that are content-based. So you could have like your intermingling words, like if you have a bunch of like 2, 4, like those words, you don't necessarily have to count those as your content words. And no more than 7 lines per slide, or 7 bullet points per slide. You want to balance it. And this could be taken in multiple ways. Balancing content per slide, so you don't have a slide with a bunch of content on it and then another slide that has 1 line on it. And it could also be incorporated to balance per slide. You want to balance the size of your titles with the size of your text. You want to make sure that you don't have one main point that is really big and another main point that is really small. But if you have a main point that's big and a sub point that's small, that works because the size draws attention to the main point. And the design ideas really helps with this. In PowerPoint, there is a button under the design tab called design ideas. And if you just put bullet points in, like in this case, I wrote down the 7-to-7 rule, balance, tabbed in design ideas and went back and did easy to read. And it came up with a design idea and it automatically formatted the graphic that you see here. So that can really help with taking what would just look like a simple bullet point and changing it into something that's a lot more appealing for the viewer to look at. But for lectures and step-by-step guides, you want to keep it simple. Only use images when they are absolutely needed. If you have a point in your lecture where you are talking about a specific, say it's a archaeology-based lecture, and you reference artifacts, having images for those artifacts would be very helpful so people can visualize what you're talking about. But you don't necessarily need images for here. This is where the dig took place. Unless, of course, you're talking about how a dig site would work. It's variable, but use your best judgment. And keep basic formats. Now, there are instances where using something like an org chart or grouping information into some smarter would help, especially with the organization charts. And you are talking about a a tree for staffing, and you try to show the order of who is in charge of who in a company. An org chart is a lot easier to understand and see connections than just a bulleted list. For presentation tools, you're going to want to the presentation should support yourself. The presentation should not be the main idea of the presentation. People should be focusing on you, not what's on the slides. The design ideas, again, they're great for taking bullet points and making them look fancier so people can enjoy graphics and hopefully not murder worms. And the content on your slides should be short and sweet. Now, just some final thoughts here is a few extra things. Don't be afraid to use new slides for a quote, an image, and those types of extra content that would take up too much space on a normal slide, and use it in the middle of a content slide. You can copy and paste. For example, if I go back to this slide and say I wanted to put an image of something in between supporting yourself and design ideas, you could take this slide here, make a new slide, put the image on it, and then copy the presentation tool slide and put it after the image. So when you flip between them, it is a smooth transition, and you can just keep clicking the next button, and you'll have copies of the slides, so you don't have to worry about going back and forth between slides. And feel free to experiment. Not only is it fun to screw around with PowerPoint, but it helps you get a feel for how you like to design your presentations, what color themes and what fonts that you think work best for what you're trying to get your point across with. And you may find that you really like certain themes because of how they look. So experiment, have fun with your presentations, and good luck with creating your future PowerPoint presentations.